April para sa paglulunsad ng kanyang kahanga-hangang proyektong The Education Chapter.
Everyone, good evening to all of you, especially to our viewers here and abroad.
In all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we hope that you'll be able to join us in our news archive. Don't be tired of the night, you just more.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Spilling the Tea on Student Affairs and Services, where we synergize life and education. Every Monday, it's 8 to 9 p.m. here only at the Education Channel. Tonight's episode is very important because we are now celebrating the Halloween. So with this episode, we are lucky enough because the university, in partnership with the University of Michigan Flint, invite us to cover their webinar entitled Students Supporting Students Through Mentorship, a case study webinar with University of Michigan Flint. So let's watch the webinar actually held last October 27 via Zoom.
Hello, everyone. So good to see you all virtually wherever you are. Welcome to today's webinar, Students Supporting Students Through Mentorship. So happy that you've taken time out your day to be with us. In a few moments today, we'll explore how the University of Michigan Flint has leveraged mentorship to support their entire first year and transfer cohort, also have given leadership opportunities to their upper division students, and have begun making strides towards long-term institutional goals. And I just can't emphasize it enough on behalf of us, all of us here at Mentor Collective. We are absolutely thrilled to have you all here with us across the country, also in Canada, but also to be co-hosting this webinar with our colleagues at the University of Michigan Flint. So thank you all for being here with us today. Before we dive into today's presentation, it is not lost on us that today is National Mentoring Day. Happy National Mentoring Day to everyone. This day was created to highlight the importance of all mentorship in all types of forms. And it's the perfect time today to talk about mentorship. And I just have to say, it's not lost on me that my mentors in my life has played a pivotal role in my professional development, my personal development. And that's why it's so important for me today to lead this conversation about the importance of mentorship, what it looks like at the University of Michigan in Flint, and more personally, to be a part of the team here at Mentor Collective. And so I hope for you on this day, you particularly join me in reflecting on mentors in your life and or influential people who have had an impact on you. And if you have not experienced a mentor, let's think about the folks who have been in your kitchen cabinet who have had an impact on your life. So happy National Mentoring Day to all of us here. And so if you haven't met me before, my name is Demario Bell. I use he, him pronouns, and I had the absolute honor to serve as the program success manager for the University of Michigan Flint program, the Success Mentorship Program. So happy to be kicking off our conversation today. And then for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Mentor Collective, we are a collective of institutions and thought leaders who are all committed to closing the opportunity gap through education, through mentorship. So thank you for being here with us today. And so it's my pleasure to welcome the team from the University of Michigan Flint to today's webinar. We have Dr. Christopher Giordano, we have Christy Ulias, and then Diamond Wilder, who is joining us from the campus. The team will introduce themselves more formally in a few minutes, but just wanted you to see who will be a part of the conversation for today. And I also want to provide you with an overview of how we're going to spend our time today. After some housekeeping notes and a brief introduction to Mentor Collective, we'll do a deep dive into how the University of Michigan Flint provided peer mentoring experiences to their diverse incoming class, early successes, and where Vice Chancellor Giordano sees the program in the future. We'll do our best to leave plenty of time for questions at the end of the webinar, and we'll also be sending out the recording of today's webinar to all registrants. So this is how we're going to be spending our time today. And to make today's webinar as accessible as possible, we're happy to offer closed captioning on this and all other live events over Zoom as well. And I know many of you are likely forming questions in your head for today's presenters. Please feel free to type your questions in at any time via the chat window. We'll also be answering our questions live throughout the session. And for any questions that we don't get to, we'll plan to cover those during the Q&A towards the end of today's session. And so hopefully most of you have returned to campus for the fall term. But let's be honest, we all know that Zoom will be a part of our daily routine going forward. Really quickly, I was just sharing with the U of M Flint team. I was actually at U of M Ann Arbor yesterday. And for many of us who are on campus-based jobs, there is something to be said about, working on campus. There's something to be said about the magic that happens on a campus. And so I really felt that nostalgia when I was back on the campus yesterday. And so I just wanted to share that with you. But I can imagine that most of us now are spending a lot of our time on Zoom. But to ensure that we all have the most positive experience, I do want to cover a few logistics. If you could keep yourself muted throughout today's conversation, that would be helpful. We would like to also ask you to keep your camera on, as that makes generally for a more personable experience for today's webinar. We are a collective of higher ed practitioners, and we want to encourage a sense of community in today's webinar. And we also recommend adjusting your video layout to speaker view so that you can see who's talking. And so finally, and most importantly, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please take a moment to introduce yourself and your institution via the chat. We want to see who's in our community today. And while you're doing that, I am going to go ahead and kick us over. So while we're getting introduction from folks in the chat, I just want to quickly say the response to today's webinar has been overwhelming. I mean, just the appetite for today's conversation has just been really, really exciting for all of us here. And so we really sincerely thank you for taking the time out to join us. We're excited to welcome new faces and existing partners alike. I feel it's important to level set and provide a bit of background about who we are at Mentor Collective before we dive into today's conversations. As mentioned, we're a collective of higher ed institutions and thought leaders dedicated to making life-changing relationships a feature of every student's college experience. Majority of students who leave college without connecting with a relevant mentor happens, and we want to make sure that we change that, and that is our goal. And so as our collective mission, we endeavor to close the opportunity gap in higher ed through meaningful relationships and through mentorship. And thank you all for being a part of that collective mission with us today. While mentorship is always useful, we found there are a few particularly impactful transition points where mentorship is important during college. First, connecting incoming students with a mentor during the admissions and pre-arrival process. Next, connecting first-year and transfer students with upper division students to help them navigate the transition to life in college and academic success. And finally, connecting upper division students with alumni mentors to guide their career exploration, career readiness, and career decisions. Mentorship should impact the entire student life cycle. I often said when I was in a campus-based job that students and alumni are a part of the same continuum. Students will become alumni and alums want to give back. So we want to make sure that we're supporting them wherever they are along that continuum. And at a super high level, there are three foundational pillars that make up how Mentor Collective partners with institutions like U of M Flint. We are far more than just a technology, and I think our partners can speak to that as we dive in, but we combine research, services, and technology to package a scalable and translatable mentorship model to each of our campus partners. And as you'll hear in today's conversation, achieving a high quality and large scale mentorship program is possible. You can do it. And we firmly believe that a culture of mentorship is critical to student success. So to kick us off, we want to hear from you via a brief poll. My colleague Jack is going to run a poll. And so we want to ask you, what student success programs are you leveraging on campus to impact your first year and your transfer students' persistence. And we are getting results coming in. And as results are coming in, we see early results indicate that folks are leveraging peer mentorship, followed by first year seminars. I'm going to share some in a moment. We still have a few coming in, about 60 seconds. Thank you all for who are responding to the poll. All right, just another 10 seconds. All right, thank you. And so here are the results. As you can see here, over 70% of our participants today are leveraging peer mentorship to impact persistence and then first year seminars and courses. I just want to quickly get like a temperature gauge from our colleagues from Flint. Any of this you find surprising or affirming?
I would say affirming for sure.
Affirming.
I didn't think that number would be that high.
Exciting too to see some of the combinations of things with mentorship and first year seminars and courses and how some of those things might overlap. And there's some good other in the chat there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. And just one more thing, we want to make sure that, just to dovetail off of that, we do want to make sure that you have access to our most recent white paper on retention. It's just so timely. You know, actually explored the effectiveness of U of M Flint's program. We do want to refer some of this research to you, and Jackie will drop that in the chat for you. And please feel free to check that out when you have an opportunity as well. All right, so here are the people behind the people. And so in addition to myself, there are two other dedicated Mentor Collective staff members who work on the U of M Flint Success Mentorship Program to make sure that we are impacting the goals. I just want to give a quick shout out to my colleagues, Eric, Lauren, and Lisa. Lisa and I had the opportunity to launch the program together over this summer. She's been a dynamic colleague of mine. And then I've had the opportunity to transition off and pass the baton to my colleague, Lauren, who is just having who's sharing her impact, doing a marvelous job working with Diamond Chris and Dr. Giordano. And so just want to really give a quick shout out to the folks on our end. And that's really what we do here at Mentor Collective. It's two teams coming together to make sure that we are having an impact on students through mentorship. And so I do want to take this time and to allow my U of M Flint team to introduce themselves. And so, Dr. Giordano, if we can start with you, welcome.
Mario, thank you so much. And thank you to our Mentor Collective partners. It has been a great partnership. And we continue to look forward to working with you and for this opportunity to be able to share our story, share a little bit more about UM Flint. And I want to thank my colleagues at UM Flint and our campus stakeholders for allowing this to happen. Very briefly, Chris Giordano, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at UM Flint. I am starting my 4th year here at UM Flint, but I am in my 30th year in higher ed. It's kind of odd until you hear it, but yes, 3-0. And we're really happy to be here today. So I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to a good conversation.
So we would say you started higher ed when you were around age 5, correct?
You're a good man, Demario.
Welcome to the conversation, Chris DeUlius.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris DeUlius. I use he, him pronouns. I've been with the university for a couple of years now, was at our Ann Arbor campus before coming here. So been in higher ed for a few years before this, but I'm excited to be able to be a part of the conversation today. My role in student involvement and leadership integrates opportunities for students to be able to find belonging on campus. And so this is a natural partnership in the way that we are approaching the work, and excited to be able to talk about our story today.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Hi, Diamond. Welcome.
Hi. So my name is Diamond Wilder, and I'm fairly new to higher ed. I am an assistant program manager for pre-college access programs on campus. And then within recent transitions, I've been honored to work alongside Chris DeUlius to design and implement our Success Mentorship program at U of M Flint. So I handle the day-to-day operations of the program, working closely with Mentor Collective, just to ensure that we are providing a growing and high-quality program to our students. So.
Thank you so much. Welcome again, team. We're so happy to embark upon this conversation with you, and we are equally just excited and so grateful for the partnership between us here at Mentor Collective. So thank you. All right, so let's dive into our conversation today. Super excited to get in our conversation. But before we talk about our program, we just want to level set and just really introduce who we are at the University of Michigan Flint. And so, Dr. Giordano, if you don't mind, if we can share with you, you mind just telling us a little bit about your campus, and also too, where is Flint in relation to the Ann Arbor campus as well? So I want to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about your school.
Absolutely. Thanks, Demario. So yeah, we'll set the stage a little bit here and give folks a sense of the University of Michigan Flint. We're one of 3 campuses of the University of Michigan, the other 2 locations being in Ann Arbor and Dearborn. We are about an hour pretty much due north of Ann Arbor on Route 23 in Michigan. And you guys might have heard that I think there's a football game this weekend that some folks might be attending. So we'll see how that goes. But we are public, urban serving, regional comprehensive university. But in addition to being urban serving, we're urban situated. We are located in downtown Flint, and we are very much a part of the Flint community. We are organized around 6 schools and colleges, our most recent being the College of Innovation and Technology, which just was launched this semester. And we're looking to break ground on a new Center for Innovation and Technology this year, and that's an exciting new development for our university and for the city of Flint. We are a mid-sized university. We do provide students with a residential living experience, but we are primarily commuter. And in the last 2 years, we have experienced new leadership at the University of Michigan Flint, and with a new chancellor came a new vision. And the new vision has been coined Project 2020, and part of that is becoming a best-in-class regional university at UM Flint. So we are really excited to focus on RRG, and that's a big focus of our efforts as part of this plan. So very quickly, when I first began here, we really needed to reevaluate our mission, vision, and core values within the Division of Student Affairs. And you see our mission there, but we also have core values that really guide our work, our decision-making, and where we invest our resources. Community and belonging, equity and inclusion, engagement and leadership, health and wellness, co-curricular, and integrative learning. So we are organized around 11 functional areas and units. 2 of our big pushes this year are around student mental health and wellness and well-being, as is the case at most institutions of higher ed as we continue to work through and in the pandemic. And we have a laser focus on our diversity, equity, and inclusion action plan and initiatives. Many of these initiatives are housed within the Division of Student Affairs, and our Chief Diversity Officer actually has a dotted line reporting line to Student Affairs. So it's one of our core values, a core value of this university, and something that we put a tremendous amount of strategy and effort into as we create the kind of environment for our students that will allow for success. And then some of the other areas that would traditionally be in a Division of Student Affairs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Giordano. One of the things that I heard you say was that mentorship was part of this broader student engagement plan at the University of Michigan Flint, which you talked about, which is the Project 2020 vision. Can you tell us a little bit more about the student engagement plan and Project 2020 at U of M Flint? Yeah, for sure. So as we were in the throes of the pandemic, it's the summer of 2020, and we're trying to determine, like the rest of the world and the rest of higher ed, what is our fall student experience really going to look like? And how can we best shape that and support that to allow for success in a world that, we didn't really
no one really knew a lot about. So we talked about developing a online student engagement plan that would focus on these core elements. And one of those core elements was creating opportunities for peer-to-peer interaction. We know that all of our students were feeling very disconnected. There was a sense of isolation. There were many issues around mental health. Students were not going to be able to be physically on campus. So we had to figure out a way, how do we provide some sense of community, some sense of connection with our students and focus on an interactive experience versus a passive online experience. So we wanted to create opportunities for students to engage with each other and opportunities for students to support each other. And one of the ways that we thought we could do that was through a structured peer-to-peer opportunity. And at that time, we weren't quite sure what that was going to be, but that was one of the core elements that we designed our student engagement plan around.
Thank you so much, Dr. Giordano, for sharing that. And as you mentioned that you wanted to offer peer-to-peer mentorship programming, and you were already doing that on campus. Mentorship was already happening on campus, but then what you noticed, there were some institutional challenges around scaling mentorship at campus. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I also want to bring Christy Ulias into that conversation as well.
Yeah, I'll lead off just two quick things, and then I'll turn it over to Chris. So we recognize that while we had pockets of mentorship and peer mentorship that exist on our campus, it was done in a very disconnected way. There wasn't a lot of organization or consistency around how this occurs. And if you were a student, let's say in the School of Management, you might have an opportunity where a student in the School of Nursing may not. And we wanted to make sure that we were strategic about how we approach this so we could provide this opportunity for all students. And we recognize that the Division of Student Affairs really could be a leader on this campus in promoting this service and then overseeing this effort. So as I turn this over to Chris, I'll share that we convened a Division of Student Affairs working group that Chris led to really think about what kind of a program could we design here and what could we pilot so we could test out, sort of test the waters and then see what some of our outcomes were before we determined how do we go from there. So with that, Chris, let me transition to you.
I think based on the priorities that you already talked about, Dr. Giordano, that helped us to be able to be informed for what we were trying to do. It wasn't just about peer-to-peer interactions. It was about making sure that we had more deep engagement because we wanted to make sure that while we were online, that we still had those opportunities. And so we initially started those conversations in that summer and looked at some of the data and looked at our retention information. We started to do some benchmarking of other peer institutions and programs. And part of what we looked at is some of the stats that are on the slide there is what we noticed is that as a part of the Project 2020, the focus on first-year student retention and second-year student retention was a part of that. But our numbers for our URM students, our underrepresented minority students, were even lower than our campus averages. And so as we were doing our research, we looked really heavily at the research from Drs. Tinto and Strayhorn to be able to think about not just persistence, but also then specifically the experiences for students of color on a predominantly white campus. And so as we started to look at some of those pieces, we looked at structures that might influence how those relationships could be built. And so the 6 existing programs that we were able to identify at the time were things that were either faculty or staff to student or a peer-to-peer, but didn't have the scope that we were looking for, to Dr. Giordano's point, to be able to then reach as many students as possible. So what we designed initially was a small pilot. We recruited a group of students to be able to help us with that. And so we trained the mentors to be able to have some basic pieces of how do you have these conversations? What does mentorship look like? How do we have a shared definition with each other as we started that conversation just in the Division of Student Affairs? And then we were able to bring in 25 students to that initial pilot that helped us to really have the data to then think about what does this look like if we're going to scale it up? How do we do this on a much larger scale? Because we knew that we wanted to have that broader impact. And so we wanted to continue to build partnerships with some of those existing programs and think about how do we build toward life cycle mentorship and what does that look like? But to be able to get there, we have to accomplish that first year student and new transfer student piece first.
Chris, Dr. Giordano, there are so many things I can comment on. You mentioned some really salient points, not only to me, but for folks who are listening. I think what's really important as you were embarking upon this, wanting to be very intentional about what does this look like for my community? Convening a working group, getting as many diverse perspectives at the table, just to see who's doing mentorship. This is what we're exploring to do. How can we connect? Where's their collaborative opportunities? But I also think a key piece of that is piloting to see how will your students engage with mentorship? I think that's very important. Is this something that your students actually want, or is there something else that they want? So I really admire the idea of piloting to see is this something that our students will engage with. Another key point before I move on is serving students who are at the margins. And I think, that's really important with mentorship. I think that, and I always tell folks, mentorship is not happening equitably for all students. And I think that term does not resonate for certain students of color, students of underrepresented minority students. It's not a term that resonates or that you hear very often. And so, Chris, when you talk about convening everyone to have this shared definition around mentorship, because I know when I was running a mentorship program for student to alumni, when I said the word mentorship, my alumni, they heard relationship. When my students heard mentorship, they heard job opportunity and their internship opportunity. So what are we talking about when we talk about mentorship and the idea that you all were able to say, hey, we need to have a definition before we roll this out? And then to your point, life cycle mentorship. So how are we hitting students at every important critical part of their student journey here? And so we're making it sound very easy, but Dr. Giordano, there was some leadership buy-in that you had to get before this started to roll. Can you share with us what was that process and some of the conversations you were having at the cabinet level or getting buy-in from your other senior leaders?
Yeah, this was perhaps the most important part of the process. We were looking at creating a structure that was sustainable. And we know in higher ed, to navigate some of the waters aren't always easy. So we really had to identify who the stakeholders were and really start to share what our vision was for peer mentorship on this campus. And that was really important. And that pushed our timeline back a little bit, but I think it put us on much firmer ground in order to kind of move this forward. So one of the first things we did was we were able to share data from our pilot program, which was really important. So, we had identified what our outcomes were, and then we could measure our success based on the metrics. And we were able to share that, this works, but this works on a small scale. We were also able to assess and identify that if we want to scale this, we do not have the staffing to be able to do this at the level that not only we want to, but we need to, because there are so many intersections with this, and one of the intersections is with our student population. We have a high percentage of first-gen, low-income, and underrepresented minority students. We need to create a model that serves everyone, but in particular, we were really focusing on bringing these students into the program and providing them with the support that they needed. So we started with sharing the information at the cabinet level. Certainly the chancellor needed to be on board, so the chancellor was on board. We spoke to all of the academic deans, and when we had some broad buy-in, then we drilled down a little bit, and then we started to identify key campus stakeholders. And then that's where Chris led the effort of providing multiple opportunities at demoing this product. And we had, in one demo, we must have had 40 people. I mean, it was a big demo. And then we just continued to kind of identify who do we need to engage in this process. Are we running into any pushback? And then let's address that now so we don't have to deal with it down the road. And then that's where Chris started to pull groups together of stakeholders on campus.
And I want to give a quick shout out. A lot of the things we used from our pilot are from the University of Michigan Dearborn's work that they had been doing before this. A lot of the things that we built to be able to then have that initial data that Dr. Giordano was talking about were informed by the things that other colleagues across other campuses are doing. So I think that these opportunities to be able to learn from each other have been really helpful. As we continued on that path that Dr. Giordano was talking about, we found that there's a lot of interest across campus in being able to do this work. There's a lot of folks who are doing different types of mentorship. And then we got into a really good conversation of, as we look at this, it's not just about a one-off opportunity for students. We need to help them to be able to create a network of mentors throughout their experiences so that they can connect with peers at a level, to be able to connect with those faculty staff mentors, to be able to connect with other folks. And so the plan right now and what we're doing has helped us to be able to then not just talk about the product in terms of working alongside of Mentor Collective to meet that staffing need and the support to be able to scale it up, but also then to think about, as we integrate those other components, how do we make sure that it makes sense still together, to be able to continue to focus on retention, to continue to focus on that sense of belonging that'll help students to be retained, but also then persist to graduation at higher rates. And those are the things, as we talk about the recruitment, retention, and graduation pieces, that continue to align across all of our academic units and then also in the Division of Student Affairs to bring that all together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And thank you so much, Dr. Giordano, for sharing that with us. And one key point that I want to highlight, as we move on, and I want to bring you back into the conversation, is that you all invested in mentorship when budgets were tight at U of M Flint, and when some budgets were being cut. And so you saw this as an important investment for student success and for your division and for your school to collaborate with us here at Mentor Collective. So personally, we're so grateful that you trusted us to be able to bring mentorship to your campus, but you were building bridges and tunnels to bring folks on board, so, and there was a secret sauce that you had to make sure that you were advocating for mentorship on campus. And so, tell us what that about. I want to bring all of you back into the conversation. What were some of those tips that you will offer to our participants who want to advocate for mentorship on campus? And as we all know, inertia is real in higher ed. How can you break down some of that inertia that exists?
Well, you mentioned probably the biggest barrier to moving something like this forward, and that's funding. So you need to come to the table with a plan. And we were fortunate enough in that we had identified one-time funding that could be used for this purpose. So that really helped to expedite not only these conversations, but these processes to get us moving forward, because we had already identified the funds. We didn't have to build a coalition and determine who could contribute to this long term, because again, we want it to be sustainable. And over these 3 years, I am confident that we will be able to demonstrate success, that then once the one-time fundings disappear, that the university will commit to this and it will become part of our sort of infrastructure and experience here. So that was definitely an important piece.
Thank you, Dr. Giordano.
I think to be able to build off of that, the need and the return on investment conversations were really helpful to be able to have the data from Mentor Collective, but also then our own pilot to be able to say, we tried this and students want to do it. And being able to build off of that student need and the data, the research on mentorship and that as a high impact practice, as is noted there on the slide, helped us to be able to then have the conversations with our partners across academic units, because our School of Management had an existing program and we were able to then partner with them to be able to bring them on board, to be able to build that relationship. And we're working with other academic units to be able to bring on the School of Nursing for what they've been doing for their pre-nursing students, and thinking about it intentionally in a both broad lens, but also then in those pockets of our existing programs to be able to integrate that helps us to really think about, to Dr. Giordano's point, that long-term success is about partnership. We have to be in this together, because we can't have a siloed program that then is there for everyone. That doesn't make sense. We need to then bring folks together to be able to do that. And so as we've thought about how we continue to have those conversations and the regular meetings that we're having with campus partners, it's then about making sure that we share some of the things, and more of what Diamond's been really focused on is that day-to-day, being able to make sure that we have the data, that we have things that students are talking about this, and that's great, but what is our engagement in the program? What does that really look like? And how do we keep up with the number of students? Because we'll talk about this in a little bit probably, but the number of students that we have had involved has been phenomenal. And so being able to then keep track of that, but also then share it out specifically for the different academic units and thinking about how we tailor our conversations to our partners, I think has also been a big part of that conversation.
Really quickly, and Diamond, this is for you, Diamond and Chris. I want to just ask, and I hope I don't get you in trouble, but when you were having these conversations, did you find that there was some reticence and or any type of concern with centralizing mentorship and or talking about trying to be more cohesive with efforts on campus?
I'll kick it off if you're cool with that, Diamond.
Yeah, go ahead.
So from my perspective, I didn't feel like there was a lot of reticence. I think that there is a shared need that folks saw. I think the financial situations that came up because of COVID actually had some helping effect for us because there was a need for the collaboration. There was a obvious conversation across our university about we need to be smart about how we are financial stewards for this university. And so as we made decisions institutionally, that was a big conversation for all of the units. And so I think that helped us to be able to think about, do we move forward together in a different way that we haven't thought about before? But I'll kick it to Diamond to be able to give her perspective on that.
And I was going to say, as we've been engaging in, a little bit more conversation with our campus partners, I know a lot of because there are those pocketed mentorship programs on campus. I want to say the only concern will probably be which is making sure that those existing programs are able to maintain ownership of those programs, making it authentic for their students, just because they've already built that sense of community with their students. So they just want to make sure that once we do come together and we start to collaborate across campus, they'll be able to own that program as well.
So, Demario, just to amplify what these guys have said, because it's really important.
Yeah.
One of the biggest stumbling blocks that you run into when you're trying to bring about change or introduce a new program on campus is you're not engaging folks in the conversation. You're not allowing them voice in the conversation. And many times they may be in full support of it, but they weren't asked about it. And people want to be asked and engaged in the process. And then as a result of that, we were able to demonstrate that this is kind of a hub and spoke model where it's going to be centralized, but you are going to be able to retain the elements of your programs that exist that are very important to you and that work. We don't need to create additional work for folks, but that is kind of the way that we sold this, and I think it resonated with folks.
Yeah, you mentioned some really key points, Dr. Giordano, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I just want to touch on really quick before we talk about our program design. To your point, relationships are key in higher ed, and I love that you said folks want to be engaged in the conversation and be asked, and so that they feel like a collaborative partner in that. And to your second point, we don't want to supplant what you're doing, but want to supplement what you're doing so that it's cohesive. And to Chris's earlier point, that students can have a pocket in this network of mentors wherever they are along their journey. So thank you all so much. And to transition us, so after all of the internal conversations were had, that's where Mentor Collective comes in terms of, okay, we're ready to go. And so we really had some really thoughtful conversations around what are targeted outcomes? What does success look like for you? What narrative do we need to tell to prove ROI for the program? Who are we serving? What population of students are we serving in the program? And then why? I think oftentimes folks know who they want to serve, but you understand the why of why you want to serve that population of students. Who's going to be providing the support? What is that intervention point from us? And then also, too, what are some key match criteria? What do we want the mentoring relationships to look like? And so for us, with the Success Mentorship program at Flint, really had intentional conversations. Note retention is important, academic success, and sense of belonging. And when we're looking at what makes a powerful and a most impactful mentorship, let's look at that most holistically. Shared academic interests, life experiences. I'm a first gen, I'm a commuter student. I identify with this other community. So thinking about what makes up that entire student experience, but also too, where do you want to be? So how does career interest also play a role in that as well? And so here we are. We launched our program in August of 2021. And since launching our program 3 months ago, it's been about 3 months ago, I would say, we've had over 280 mentorships that have been formed in the program. We set an original goal of, I think, 225, and we just knocked that goal off the park overnight. There's a strong appetite for mentorship at the Flint campus, and we see that by the number of volunteers who raise their hand to say, hey, I want to support a peer mentor, support a peer student in the program. And then we have over 76% of our peers already have reported at least one conversation to us to say, hey, I've talked with our peer. But what we do also know here at Mentor Collective that our peers are having 2 or 3 times the conversations, and they're reporting to us as relationships form. They tend not to report as much to us, but we do check in with them on a regular basis. But I just want to quickly ask the group, how do you feel about this initial response from your community to mentorship now at scale, at a large scale at Flint? Diamond, I would love to start with you.
Sure. The response has been pretty good. I like watching the engagement on the dashboard, which we'll talk about later. But I know one way we wanted to really ensure a sense of community with this program on campus, creating those supplemental programs and efforts that were not too taxing on students. And so they really take heed to that. And so as this program is a DEI initiative on campus, we were grateful to receive supplemental funding to provide those resources and programming to participants. And so if anyone is thinking about having Mentor Collective on your campus, if you see fit or need for supplemental programming that can make an impact. And that was one of the things that we noticed in the data within our pilot program, was that students wanted to have, outside conversations going beyond the scope of the Mentor Collective system as well. And so one thing I wanted to say, we've incorporated semester open houses just to introduce the program to our students. We've also incorporated end of the year programming, which will essentially just give participants a chance to relax and just really reward them for the hard work they've been doing and show gratitude for their appreciation of the program. And so we went above and beyond and tried to create scholarship opportunities that are exclusive for the Success Mentorship Program participants. And those are additional efforts that we look forward to help booster the program's success. You can even do something as ordering t-shirts just to go and form that sense of community on campus. Being present at campus-wide events as well, just to kind of show that unity and allowing those participants, again, another space for students to come with their mentees or mentors and have that interaction there. And also, I know a lot of campuses, majority of campuses do have campus advanced learning management systems. And so one thing that we did, we created an organization within that just to allow mentors to ask, discuss, we can post announcements, updates. So it goes beyond the scope of that Mentor Collective system. And we just wanted to make sure we were providing that sense of community. So students really like that just because, everything's virtual now. So it allows that physical, personal interaction.
Yeah, and really quickly, and Dr. Giordano, Chris, I'll bring you in. We'll touch on this very quickly. But Diamond, you're thinking about what is the experience that we're creating for our payers? How do we take what's happening in Mentor Collective and campus and bring them both together where students feel a part of this community beyond post-match? Because mentorship is not just pairing 2 random people together, crossing our fingers and hoping they get along and say, go have at it. But how are we engaging them in thoughtful programming and intentionality? And to your point, incentivizing behavior and engagement, getting folks really, really excited about mentorship. So thank you for mentioning that, Chris. Anything that was, that's your reaction, followed by Dr. Giordano.
Yeah, I think Dr. Giordano may share some of the similar things, but as we were discussing how to scale from our 25-person pilot to our goal was over 200 for the first year, and then building from there to be able to make sure that all of our incoming students had access to this, our concern was, how do we make sure that we actually get mentors? Because we did an incentive program where we provided a small, not necessarily a stipend, but kind of like a thank you for the mentors in the previous iteration when we were doing the pilot. And how we were one of the things that we were concerned about was, will we actually get students to step up? And so the number of current students who stepped up as volunteers right away, immediately when we launched, was just so incredible to be able to see. The number of students that were willing to spend that time just to be able to support other students. I think that the messaging was helpful with that and the connection there. But I think it's also a demonstration of what that looked like. And so what we found is that we knew that we wouldn't be able to afford the stipend piece in addition to what we had initially planned. And so we were going to go with a fully volunteer role, and it works. And so that was one of the pieces that really stood out to me as a kind of surprising piece, but also just the number of conversations that are logged and the flexibility of the dashboards that Mentor Collective provides to be able to look at the data in different ways so that we can see based on an individual pairing in the mentorship what's going on, or we can look at the big picture, or we can think about how many students this mentor is paired with and what does that mean, and being able to then follow up and engage with that student to talk about their experience has been really helpful.
Thank you, Chris.
And Demario, I don't know if you need to move on, and that's fine if you do, but I would just add that the response has been tremendous, and something that I don't know that I knew what to expect, quite honestly. But the fact that there are members within our community that want to support their fellow students and do it voluntarily has been one of my biggest takeaways from this experience so far. That is embedded within our culture. It's part of our culture, and this is something that we can continue to develop and build on.
Yeah, and this is a starting point. This is our benchmark. And so to your point, we already see early excitement, early engagement. We can just scale from there. And to break up or supplement our conversation, we see that in this student quote here from one of our current participants in the program. So when we talk about go back to our goals of the program, when we talk about sense of belonging, helping transition to school, building trust, communication, and peer mentorship impact, we see that in this quote here from the student who's participating in their program. Their mentor has been fantastic. They help make a difference in their sense of belonging before they've arrived on campus, but also have made that transition easier as well. So when we think about wraparound support, what is full-time employees doing, full-time staff doing, but how also can peers support one another as well? Because what we also know that peers are often, they'll share more with another peer than they will with an academic advisor, a professor, or with another counselor on campus as well. So thank you so much. Chris and Diamond, you all talked about the data on the dashboard and how helpful that has been for you. And so for you who are new to a Mentor Collective, each of our partners have access to our partner dashboard, which is real-time information that you can use to see what's happening in your community. As Chris and Diamond mentioned, it provides formative data such as number of conversations being had, number of conversation topics, demographic information, resource guides, who's paired with who, how many mentees is a mentor supporting, participant info. And so this program has been highly successful since we've launched in August. We've had over 800 logged conversations from participants. Every 15 to 28 days, we check in with pairs just to see how they're doing, how's their mentoring relationships. And then we've had over 4,000 SMS messages exchanged between pairs. And so when pairs are first paired with one another, they get SMS text from us or at Mentor Collective, letting them know of their pair, and they can communicate on that SMS relay. And if any of you have used Uber, it's very similar to Uber, anonymous texting back and forth, but we do see a number of our conversations do migrate off of the SMS, and we are able to measure that engagement as well. But this high engagement only indicates that there is a strong appetite for mentorship, peer mentorship at U of M Flint, and that students really want to be a part of a community on School and Diamond. I want to just ask this question more to you. How have you used the dashboard to leverage insights and or learn more about your students and or scale the program?
Yeah, leveraging the dashboard is one factor that, you want to make sure that you are included in your day-to-day operations. And so like Demario mentioned, that dashboard provides that real-time data where you are able to track and monitor the engagement, participant demographics, matching, progression, et cetera. And so it gives us essentially a quick view to help provide me essentially with the details that we need to troubleshoot any concerns that the mentee may be having. Check out mentor profiles so you can get a little bit more understanding of how that mentor and mentee is working along in their relationship. And so in our case, we have quite a few new campus partners for this program. So this dashboard gives you a snapshot of things. And so you're able to provide that brief programmatic updates that provides a bit more insight to where we currently are in the program. And it keeps us on our toes of how we can also scale the program as well.
Yeah, thank you, Diamond. And also another key feature about the dashboard are our insight flags. And our insight flags, for those who aren't familiar, anytime a mentor are engaged in a mentoring relationship, if a mentee brings up something in their mentoring relationship that a mentor feels that the school might need to know and or act on, they're able to let us know here at Mentor Collective via logging that on the dashboard or is texting it to us. But I get an email notification. Diamond, you and Chris get an email notification about those insight flags that come in. And those insight flags will be around homesickness, academic struggles, financial aid. It really runs the gamut. But you have found the insight flag to be useful because it has allowed you to offer proactive support to the mentees anytime you feel that an intervention has been needed. Diamond, can you tell us how have you leveraged insight flags for your program?
Yeah, leveraging the insight flags is probably one of the more essential pieces to this. And also it can be one that can determine the success of your mentorship program. But it allows the mentors to share their concerns about alarming issues, or just giving us updates on how their mentee may be doing if there is something that is concerning. And so these topics, like Mario mentioned, can range from academic struggles, mental health, financial problems, etc. So when a mentor submits those insight flags in the system, the programming staff, such as myself and Chris, we get those notifications. And so our insight flag process will include either following up with the mentee, following up with the mentor and campus service department if necessary. And so a lot of the time, those insight flags are from new students who have no clue with how to deal with so many different issues at once. And so we'll send a follow-up email to that student with the proper steps and information to campus resources so they can take advantage of immediately. And immediately is probably the key part, especially when you're in the beginning or the middle of the semester and you want students to be able to change that behavior. And so just one example, we had a student and she had a multitude of different things. And so she was considering dropping a math class. She was suffering from anxiety, was becoming overwhelming. She had an upcoming exam and she didn't necessarily feel comfortable about the material with. And so her mentor reported those things in the insight flag, and they did suggest her to follow with her academic advisor, which was correct, but there were a few other steps. And so one thing that we take pride in is, further that insight flag system is there to create that further support. So that way it's not all up to your mentors and they don't feel overwhelmed because they're students themselves. And so being able to have that reinforcement from staff, it helps. And so we will send an email to our students, just providing them again with the steps. So if they are suffering obviously with academic troubles, they may need to see an advisor, but also tutoring may be a feasible recommendation for them. Going to counseling and accessible services on campus. So there's a variety of things of how you want to make sure that you navigate that student when you are following up on that insight flag to make sure they are aware, and then also providing them with the information within however which way that you're going to follow up. So that's essentially very important. And I know taking it one step further, we have what we call a care team on campus, which is our campus assessment, response, and evaluation team. And so this team is a cross-divisional multidisciplinary team with a centralized focus on addressing essentially situations and behaviors that have the potential to impede student success and or threaten the safety and security of students on campus in the learning environment. And so within that nature, we can also, we've provided, I mentioned earlier, within your educational management systems on campus, if you have Blackboard or Canvas, for example, we've created organizations on those platforms that allow the students to also have access to supplemental training. And supplemental training is also how to submit a care report to our care team. So if they have these alarming flags, this is also an additional step that the mentor can take. And if the mentor doesn't feel comfortable with taking it, I'll go ahead and I'll do it and I'll submit that report to our care team. So that way our care team is aware and they can also direct and have that direct interaction with the student to intervene as they see fit. So that's how we usually go about the insight flag, but it's a very essential part to this whole ordeal here. So.
Diamond, I really appreciate that. And I really love hearing the process that you all have put in place with the Success Mentorship Program and making sure that your students have the support that they need. And to your point, we don't want our mentors to take on the role as an advisor. And so that's why we have the Insight Flags, and we'll take it from there. And so I just want to really give kudos to the U of M Flint team for really being able to launch a really successful program over this summer, having the collaboration with us here at Mentor Collective. I know that we had a couple of questions, which is so timely, around what criteria did we use to match pairs? What does training look like? And so those are really key questions I want to touch on. And so before we launched the program, there were conversations with Chris and Diamond in terms of what's important to you in mentoring relationships. Mentees and mentors, when they sign up for the program, they're able to complete a matching survey. And what a matching survey is biographical information about who they are, what are their interests, career, academic, what are they looking for in a mentor? How often do they want to communicate? And so they're really to share their preferences in terms of what's important to them in a mentoring relationship. But that was also influenced by what Chris and Diamond wanted as well, in terms of how is that tied back to our goals in our program. Once we had our matching survey all set, that was attached to our program, mentees and mentors sign up. But once mentees and mentors sign up for the program, all mentors have to go through a mandatory 45-minute live training. And through that live training, we talk about what does it mean to be a successful mentor. We go over mentor best practices, how to use our dashboard, insight flags, how to log a conversation. We go over FERPA. We do community building activities just to make sure that we build their efficacy, their self-efficacy around being prepared to be a mentor in the program. And so it's really thoughtful and intentional, making sure that our mentors are ready to be mentors in the program. And so before we move on, one really quickly, I would say, as we wrap up, what is one thing that you would like our peers to know about your program or this partnership, about even launching a scalable mentorship program?
Well, let me just quickly, I'll share something that I had written down to share before, but I think one of the most powerful aspects of the program and peer mentorship is the relational factor. So much of our interactions with students are transactional. And once we get within virtual environments, it becomes even more transactional. So this allows us to really develop relationships with our students. And the power of relationships could be the difference between succeeding and dropping out. So, that's just a big piece of this.
Very true. Thank you, Dr. Giordano.
I think my quick piece would be it's possible, because the idea of this felt really daunting. There was some questions in the chat about how did you fund this and some of those pieces, and that was a real concern for us. The scalable pricing with Mentor Collective as a partner, plus then being able to use those one-time dollars that Dr. Giordano identified, and thinking about how do we be intentional with that, was really helpful to make that possible. The reality was that we didn't have the resources alone, and so partnership made it happen.
Thank you so much. And Diamond?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, just like Dr. Giordano mentioned, that mentorship is a very essential component, just developing those meaningful relationships with your peer-to-peer. And even if you're going beyond the scope, alumni, faculty, staff, et cetera, it's extremely important for a student and how they navigate their journey throughout their college career. And so really, I just want you all to take go a step further and take that time to really see what is mentorship, if any, what does that look like on your campus, and how can you shift the culture of it where it essentially has a positive impact on student success.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Diamond. Thank you, Chris and Dr. Giordano. And this is what I heard. I heard meaningful relationships. I heard it's essential to the college experience, the student experience. And then Chris reminded us it's possible. And so if there's any of you who want to learn more about Mentor Collective, what we do, what could mentorship look like on your campus, please feel free to fill in this poll. But as you heard from our partners here at U of M Flint, it seemed daunting, but it's possible. It's a way to make sure that you are impacting your student experience and also impacting retention as well. And so thank you for those who have definitely joined this conversation with us today. And before we do go and move on, I do want to remind you that we do have a virtual event that will be led by Mentors Collective's enrollment team, and we will feature enrollment research spotlight by Doug Shapiro, who's the Vice President of Research and the Executive Director of the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. That's a mouthful. On the First Look fall 2020 publication. And so we'll also hear from prominent enrollment leaders that have decided to make large-scale mentorship a foundation of their enrollment and admissions process. So if you are available on this day, please come and join us on this conversation. We would love to have you. And I just want to take another opportunity to say thank you so much to Dr. Giordano, Chris, and Diamond for partnering with us here at Mentor Collective, for sharing with our audience how mentorship is impacting your community, sharing that it is possible and that it is something that can impact students' experiences. And thank you to everyone who took time out of your day to join us as well in this conversation. That is what it means to be a part of the collective here at Mentor Collective. So thank you all very, very much for joining us today.
There you have it. I hope you learned something about the webinar conducted by Michigan Flint, entitled Student Supporting Student Through Mentorship, a case study webinar with University of Michigan Flint. And they encourage us to join in their future events and a webinar on Tuesday, November 9, okay, with the Nazareth College on the topic how to reduce melt and foster a sense of belonging through peer member or mentorship. So please watch that, or you may register to their link, and I will just click the link below. Okay, if you want to attend the said webinar. So for now, I'm Mark Lataza, and hope to see you again next Monday here only at the Education Channel, spilling the tea on student affairs and services. So with that, before I go, let me remind you, think what is right, but do what is just. Good night, God bless, and take care always.